There is something that happens to a parent when the person who hurt their child gets to just keep living their life. Something that no courtroom, no sentence, no apology can fix. And every single person on this list reached that point and decided they were done waiting for someone else to handle it. This is parents who killed their child's killer in court. Number 1. The mother who shot her daughter's killer. So this starts in Lübeck, West Germany, on March 6, 1981. And what should have been a regular murder trial turned into something that nobody in that courtroom was prepared for. A 30-year-old single mother named Marianne Bachmeier walked into room 157 of the Lübeck District Court with a Beretta 70 pistol she had smuggled in, walked straight up behind the man on trial, and fired 7 shots into his back. 6 of them connected. He was dead on the courtroom floor in seconds. To understand why, you have to go back about 10 months. May 5, 1980. Anna Bachmeier was 7 years old and had gotten into an argument with her mum before school, so she decided she just wasn't going that day. She left the house and ended up at the home of a neighbor she already knew, a 35-year-old butcher named Klaus Grabowski. She had been there before, actually. He had cats, and Anna loved playing with them. So when he invited her in, she did not think anything of it. What happened next was horrific. Grabowski held Anna in his apartment for hours, sexually assaulted her, and then strangled her to death using his fiancée's pantyhose. He packed her small body into a cardboard box and left it on the bank of a nearby canal. Now, here is where it gets even worse, because Grabowski had a whole history that the system had completely fumbled. In 1973, he got a probation sentence for strangling a 6-year-old girl. Not jail, just probation. Then, a few years after that, he molested 2 more young girls. And to avoid prison for that, he voluntarily agreed to castration in 1976. But by 1978, he had quietly started hormone therapy to try to reverse it. So when Anna came to his door, he was exactly who he had always been, and the system had basically handed him back everything that made him dangerous. The same evening he killed Anna, his own fiancée went to the police. She had found out what he did and turned him in. In custody, Grabowski admitted to the killing, though he denied the sexual assault. And his explanation for the murder was the kind of thing that would push any parent to a breaking point. He said Anna had tried to seduce him. He said she threatened to tell her mother he had touched her unless he gave her money, and that he killed her because he was afraid of going back to prison. That was the story he was going to stand up in court and tell, about a 7-year-old girl. Marianne Bachmeier had not had an easy life before any of this. She grew up with an absent alcoholic father and a violent stepfather, and her mother eventually pushed her out of the house. She had her first child at 16 and her second at 19, both placed for adoption. Anna was her 3rd child, and by everyone who knew them, Anna was the absolute center of her world. Marianne ran a bar called Tipasa in Lübeck, and people described Anna as this happy, vibrant little kid who was always around. The months between Anna's death and the trial were brutal. Marianne was falling apart. When the trial finally opened on March 4, 1981, sitting there day after day and watching the defense argue that Grabowski's actions were caused by a hormonal imbalance, while knowing this man was about to take the stand and repeat his lie about Anna in front of everyone, something in her made up its mind. On the evening of March 5th, she overheard a conversation that made her believe Grabowski would be making a formal statement the next morning. She later said the thought of him lying about her daughter one more time was what decided it. She went home that night and got the gun. The next morning, around 10, she stood up, walked toward Grabowski from behind, pulled the Beretta out of her purse, and fired. 7 shots. 6 hit him in the back. He died almost instantly. She lowered the gun and didn't resist when the officers came for her. Judge Gwenther Kroger spoke with her right after. He recounted her, saying, "I wanted to kill him. He killed my daughter. I wanted to shoot him in the face, but I shot him in the back. I hope he's dead." Later, when a doctor asked her for a handwriting sample, she wrote, "I did it for you, Anna," and drew 7 hearts next to it, 1 for each year of her daughter's life. Her trial started in late 1982. Initially charged with murder, the prosecution eventually reduced that to intentional manslaughter after all the evidence came in. Her defense argued she had not decided to pull the trigger until the moment she believed Grabowski was about to lie about Anna on the stand. And they also placed serious blame on the Lübeck authorities who had approved his hormone therapy, pointing out that without that decision, Anna would still be alive. On March 2, 1983, after 28 days of proceedings, She was convicted of manslaughter and unlawful possession of a firearm and sentenced to 6 years. She served 3 before being released on parole in June of 1985. Marianne sold her life story to the magazine Stern for 100,000 Deutsche Marks to cover her legal costs. After her release, she married a teacher in 1985, moved with him to Lagos, Nigeria in 1988, where he worked at a German school, and they eventually divorced in 1990. She moved to Palermo, Sicily after that and worked in a hospice for a time before being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She came back to Lübeck, the same city where all of it happened, and died there on September 17, 1996, at 46 years old. She was buried next to Anna in Bergtor Cemetery in Lübeck. And if you think that tested the limits of what a parent will do, the next case is something else entirely. The father coming up did not walk into a courtroom, but his vengeance was in no way less. Number 2. The father who hunted his daughter's killer across continents. Before any of this happened, André Bamberski was genuinely the last person you would expect to become a vigilante. He was a quiet, religious French accountant, soft-spoken, rule-following, the kind of guy who just trusted the system. That version of him basically stopped existing on the morning of July 10th, 1982, when the phone rang at 10:30 and his ex-wife told him their 14-year-old daughter Kalinka was dead. The story goes back to 1976, when the Bamberski family settled in Pechbusk, just outside of Toulouse. 5 houses down the road lived a German cardiologist named Dieter Krombach, a widower with 2 kids of his own, charming, well-liked, and someone André had no reason to distrust. What André didn't know was that Krombach's first wife, Monika Henze, had died in Frankfurt in October of 1969 at just 24 years old, hours after her husband had injected her with something. No charges were ever filed. Krombach remarried within 10 months. An affair started between Krombach and André's wife, Danielle. By 1977, they had both left their spouses and married each other, and Kalinka and her younger brother Nicholas went to live with their mother and Krombach in Lindau, a small Bavarian town on Lake Constance. Kalinka attended a French-language boarding school in Freiburg as a day student and spent weekends and summers at the Krombach house. She was almost 15 that summer, barely spoke German, and was counting down the days until August when she would finally move back to live with her father. Everyone who knew her described her as sporty, outgoing, full of life. On Friday, July 9th, 1982, Kalinka spent the whole day windsurfing on Lake Constance, came home, had dinner with the family, and went to bed when Krombach told her to switch off the lights around midnight. That was the last anyone would see her alive. The next morning, Krombach came downstairs in his riding clothes and found her dead in bed, already in full rigor mortis. She had been dead for hours. He tried injecting stimulants directly into her heart and legs, then called emergency services. The autopsy later established she died somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning. When Danielle called André that day, she relayed 2 theories from Krombach: heat stroke from the day on the lake, or a delayed reaction from a car accident back in Morocco 8 years prior. André was flawed. His daughter was a perfectly healthy teenager. None of that made any sense. 3 months later, he got a copy of the autopsy report and understood why it bothered him so much. It showed injection marks on Kalinka's arms, right leg, and chest. There was a vaginal tear, fresh blood, and a substance consistent with semen on her legs. Her stomach contents were undigested, meaning she died very shortly after eating, which blew apart Krombach's timeline entirely. She had vomited while unconscious. And then there was the detail that haunts this case most, which is that during the autopsy, Kalinka's genitals were removed and were never returned. When André had her body exhumed in France 3 years later, they were still missing. That evidence was gone for good. The German prosecutor looked at all of that and closed the case. André spent years trying to get someone to reopen it. He brought in independent experts who confirmed that the cobalt iron compound Krombach admitted injecting Kalinka with right after dinner would have caused an immediate adverse reaction, not hours later the way Krombach claimed. He hired prominent criminal attorney Rolf Bossi to push for a formal trial. The case reached the higher regional court in Munich in 1987 and came back the same way. Insufficient evidence. So André quit his job, burned through his savings, and kept traveling to Bavaria to monitor Krombach's movements. In 1983, he walked through Lindau during Oktoberfest, handing out flyers with Kalinka's photo, directly accusing Krombach of rape and murder. Krombach sued him for defamation and won a judgment of 500,000 German marks. André refused to pay a single penny. Meanwhile, Krombach was still practicing medicine and living freely in Bavaria. Then, in February of 1997, a 16-year-old patient came to his clinic for an endoscopy. His assistant was at lunch. Krombach administered anesthesia and raped her while she was unconscious. He admitted to it at trial. Several other women came forward with the same account. He got a 2-year suspended sentence and lost his medical license, then kept practicing anyway at clinics across Germany by showing a photocopy of his revoked license. Caught in 2006, sentenced to 28 months, served 11, released early. France had tried Krombach in absentia in 1995 and sentenced him to 15 years, but the European Court of Human Rights annulled that verdict in 2001 because he had never been able to defend himself in person. France even paid him 100,000 francs as compensation. Germany refused every extradition request that came its way. And here was the brutal reality André was living with. France had a 30-year statute of limitations. If Krombach was not physically on French soil to stand trial by 2012, the case was permanently closed. André was in his early 70s, had been conned by multiple people who took his money and disappeared, and was running out of time fast. In 2009, he was staying at a hotel in Bregenz, Austria, about 10 minutes from Scheidegg, Bavaria, where Krombach was now living. He was watching the man's routine and talking openly to anyone around him. Word reached a Kosovar-born bartender in Bregenz who contacted André, said he wanted to help, asked for nothing in return, and said it was for humanitarian reasons. André insisted on covering expenses. They scouted Scheidegg together. André pointed out Krombach's home and then went back to France to wait. On the evening of October 17, 2009, a woman's voice with a heavy German accent called André at home and told him to get to Mulhouse. That same night, 3 men grabbed Krombach outside his home in Scheidegg, beat him badly enough to fracture his skull, bound and gagged him, drove him through Austria and Switzerland into France, and left him tied up on Rue de Tilleul in Mulhouse, 4 blocks from the police station. An anonymous call went out to police, the caller putting on a Russian accent, giving the exact street. Officers found a 74-year-old man beaten and bound on the pavement. The first thing Krombach said when the gag came off was, "Bamberski is behind this." Police found 19,000 euros in cash in André's hotel room. He was arrested within days. Germany demanded Krombach back and the extradition of Bamberski and all 3 kidnappers. France refused everything. In October of 2011, Krombach was convicted of causing intentional bodily harm, resulting in unintentional death, and sentenced to 15 years, after multiple women testified he had drugged and assaulted them as teenagers, using those same injections. The European Court of Human Rights upheld the conviction in 2018. He was released on medical grounds in February of 2020, transferred to a nursing home in Lower Saxony, and died there on September 12, 2020, at 85 years old. He never confessed to what happened to Kalinka. André was tried for organizing the kidnapping in May of 2014. He confessed fully, said he felt a moral compulsion to act, and believed he deserved a full acquittal. The court gave him a 1-year suspended sentence. He walked out free, said he was a bit disappointed by the result, and did not appeal. Nearly 30 years. His job, his savings, most of his relationships. He did not stop until it was done. So the next one is a little different from the others, because Eduardo Gallow did not pull a trigger, did not hire kidnappers, and did not walk into a courtroom with a gun. What he did was arguably harder than any of that. He closed his business, walked away from his career, and spent over a year doing the job the police completely refused to do. Number 3. The father, who became a detective. It was July 9th, 2000 in Tepoztlán, a resort town in the state of Morelos, Mexico, about 90 minutes south of Mexico City. Eduardo's 25-year-old daughter Paula was spending the weekend at the family's vacation home with her friends. She had just finished her bachelor's degree in psychology and was working toward a master's in psychoanalysis. People who knew her said she was the kind of person who would drag you into a heated debate about criminal behavior in Mexican society the second you sat down, which, given what was about to happen, is almost too painful to think about. A group of men hopped the fence surrounding the property that night, broke into the house, and terrorized the young women inside for 2 hours. They stole jewelry, clothes, and 2 cars from the driveway. And they took Paula. Eduardo paid the ransom, $18,500 in cash plus jewelry. Everything he could pull together, handed over, because what else do you do? And then, a week later, on the day of the ransom exchange, something went wrong that changed the entire shape of this story. An unidentified group opened fire on the kidnappers at the exchange, killing 3 of them. 2/3 of the ransom money was found sitting right next to their bodies. The kidnappers took that as an ambush and murdered Paula in retaliation. Her body was found nearby a day later. She had been shot in the back and in the neck. 3 suspects were arrested fairly quickly, but the man who actually pulled the trigger, known in the gang as Apache 2, was still out there. Eduardo went to the Attorney General of the state of Morelos. Nothing. The police treated it as one case among hundreds, all equally brutal, none particularly urgent. Months passed and nothing moved. So Eduardo Gallow shut down his hotel consulting firm and started investigating himself, with 0 experience doing anything like this. For over 11 months, he worked without a single day off. He interviewed local residents, people living on public land near Tepoztlan, and other kidnapping victims in the area. He studied the ages and personal connections of local criminal groups and how they operated. He analyzed phone records and chased physical leads across state lines. He later found in his research that up to 90% of kidnappings in Mexico are never even reported because victims are terrified of violent reprisal. He was working in a world where almost everyone around him had every reason to stay silent. But he kept going. Eventually, he traced one of the kidnappers to a payphone that had been used after the kidnapping in the town of Tultitlán in the state of Mexico. He brought that directly to the authorities and let them take it from there. Police set up a stakeout and waited. 28-year-old Francisco Zamora Arellano was arrested and confessed to Paula's murder. Eduardo later published a book called Paula, Denunciation of a Kidnapping and of a Corrupt Society, and became a public advocate for reporting crimes in Mexico, arguing that every unreported kidnapping made the next one easier to commit. That became his whole mission after all of this. He did not take justice into his own hands, and honestly, that is what makes this case stand out among all the others on this list. After paying the ransom, losing his daughter anyway, watching the system ignore him completely for months, he still handed the killer over to the police instead of handling it himself. At his daughter's funeral, he said, "I will always love you, my adored child." And that is where this one ends. The next case, though, is where things get really raw and in the moment, because this father didn't have months to process anything. He had about 30 seconds to understand what he was looking at inside his own home, and everything that followed was completely unplanned. Number 4. Dad saves his son, son saves his dad. This was just a regular Tuesday afternoon in Daytona Beach, Florida, on July 18, 2014, and 35-year-old Jason Browning stepped out of the house to grab something to eat. He left his 11-year-old son at home with Raymond Frolander, an 18-year-old who had basically become part of the family over the years. Frolander lived with them. He and the kid played video games together all the time. Jason had 0 reason to think anything was off, so he left, came back, walked through the door, and the look on Frolander's face stopped him cold, and then Frolander's pants dropped to his ankles. Jason went absolutely feral. He beat Frolander until he was unconscious on the floor, and by his own admission he did not stop. But then he paused, dragged the body across the house, went to the kitchen and got a butcher knife, because apparently a full beating was not feeling like enough for what he had just walked in on. He told reporters later he was going to kill him. He fully intended to. And then his 11-year-old son stepped directly in front of him. The boy looked his dad in the eye, said one word, and shook his head. That was all it took. Jason, standing there holding a butcher knife after beating someone unconscious, put it down. He said later he did not want to traumatize his son any more than he already had been, so he called 911 instead. He told the dispatcher he had just walked in on a grown man molesting his son, and that the man was currently in a bloody puddle on the floor waiting for officers. And at some point during that call, still standing in the room with Frolander, Jason addressed him directly and told him he was lucky that Jason was a God-fearing man. Frolander was taken to Halifax Medical Center, treated for his injuries, and then taken straight to Volusia County Jail. When police questioned him, he immediately said he was guilty. Under further questioning, he admitted he had been molesting the boy for 3 years, starting when the child was just 8 years old, and that he had threatened him with terrible consequences if he ever told anyone. Daytona Beach Police Chief Mike Chitwood made it clear immediately that Jason was facing 0 charges, saying the father walked in on his son being abused in his own home and did what any father would do. The internet very much agreed. Frolander's mugshot went completely viral, and you can probably imagine why. In April of 2015, Frolander pleaded no contest to lewd and lascivious molestation of a victim under 12, which carries a maximum of life in prison, and Circuit Judge Leah Case sentenced him to 25 years. He will be registered as a sexual predator for the rest of his life after release. Outside the courthouse, after sentencing, Jason told reporters that Frolander was going to spend the next 25 years learning exactly why Jason chose to let him live. And then he also revealed publicly that he himself had been a victim of sexual abuse as a child. He said he knew exactly what his son was going through and was not going to pressure him to talk before he was ready. Outro. And so that is 4 parents. 4 completely different situations, 4 completely different ways of reaching the same breaking point.